Let me get a round of applause, please. I'd like to welcome our special guest tonight, Mr. Ryan Lackey. He's actually one of the original cypherpunks. For those of you who are unaware what a cypherpunk is, maybe we'll talk about it a little bit later. But yeah, he's also was CSO of Tezos Foundations, and at one point or another, he had about what $2 billion of assets under management.
Yeah, about $2 billion in Bitcoin, Ethereum, Tezos tokens, all sorts of stuff.
Just a little bit, couple dollars. So, and also too, what's the name of the new project you're talking about? Berta's?
I'm now Chief Security Officer for Evertos. It's a crypto asset insurance company, so we help other people who have billions of dollars of crypto assets keep them safe.
And he actually knows what he's doing. So, we want to go ahead and give a round of applause to my guest, Mr. Ryan Lackey. Ryan, I know we always kind of do this. I've had you on Crypto Mondays a couple of times already, but, obviously for the guys who are unaware of you, why don't you start off, tell them a little bit about your background, maybe talk a little bit about the cypherpunks and your transition through your career to where you are now, sir.
So I've been involved in cryptocurrency and the things that came before cryptocurrency since probably the early 1990s. There was the Cypherpunks mailing list started by Tim May, John Gilmore, John Perry Barlow, a bunch of cool people like that. And people were discussing basically what the world would be like once anonymous, cryptographically secured currency, mass adoption of cryptography, everything else would exist. They worked on the tools. They helped make a lot of these things, as well as a lot of prototypes and discussions and everything else. It was a very interesting time. It was also a very interesting place to grow up as a teenager, like on a mailing list, and learn about all these things where individuals can stand up against every state in the world and the individual would still win. So it was definitely fun. I actually moved to the Caribbean to do some early gold-backed digital currency stuff in the late 90s. I moved to Anguilla, which is an island maybe 1,000 kilometers east of here. Went to MIT, dropped out to do a startup, did a bunch of other crypto stuff, did an offshore data haven in the North Sea called Sealand, or Haven Co. on Sealand, a bunch of conferences around the world, all sorts of cool stuff.
Yeah. So the cypherpunks, right, are a precursor to Satoshi, which is kind of the part he left out, right? So the cypherpunks were actually on the mailing list with Satoshi, and they actually communicated with this guy, that's the mysterious guy, Satoshi, not maybe guy, girl, team, who knows? Maybe it was Mr. Haft, who knows? But ultimately, the Satoshi people and you shared emails, right?
Yeah, there's a whole list where all the ideas that got turned into Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is really just a collection of probably 5 separate technologies that got integrated together by Satoshi. Those things were discussed really since the 90s. Some of them really became available from like 2005 to 2008. And both the cypherpunks list and the cryptography list, which is sort of an offshoot of it, are places where this stuff was discussed. I was on the mailing list. I saw the original post, and sadly, I was anti-Bitcoin, like super anti-Bitcoin, from when that mail went out until about 2011, 2012, because it did not have any privacy built in. And I was worried that Bitcoin without privacy would lead to all sorts of bad stuff. And some of that stuff happened, but I did not see that the real innovation of Bitcoin was taking all these technologies and creating a market incentive for people to quickly and early join the system and promote it. That was the thing that really made Bitcoin different than everything that came before it. So it created an early adopter incentive. Nothing before that had that. And yeah, so I would have several $1 billion more than I have if I were not so privacy focused back then.
Well, the good thing is you are privacy focused, right? And you're also big on security and making sure your assets are built safe. So we're here to talk about, with obviously Ryan being a specialist in this area. I don't think many people globally have managed more assets in crypto than Ryan specifically. The recent losses that have taken place in crypto, right? Obviously, myself and all the rest of the people here are knee deep in the industry. We share relationships with a variety of people who are newcomers, and this is being their first crash, and so on and so forth. But this crash is a little bit different, right? It was precipitated by a couple of black swan events that were very targeted and very malicious and calculated. So let's just talk about a little bit about the events, more specifically related towards, say, what happened with UST, Terra and Luna. And go into how that's, kind of precipitated our current bear market.
Yeah, I think it's important to distinguish between market-related losses, so things like people losing faith in a project where they think that something will take longer than it's going to take, or or maybe there's a different asset that's worth more, or macro things, all sorts of stuff like that, which is responsible for probably a lot of, say, Bitcoin going from 69,000 to 24,000 or something. Also, there are specific cases of what the insurance industry would call loss events, not market related, but things like incidents of fraud, incidents of technical failure, things like that, where specific projects lost money because of someone hacking a project, someone acting criminally or maliciously, all sorts of stuff like that. So we can talk about both of those categories of things. I'm personally more focused on the security side and on the loss events that are insurable losses and things like that, not so much the market trading stuff. Because honestly, if you were really good at market trading, you would be doing that full time, and that is a skill that is very specialized. But yeah, there's definitely been a mix of causes that have caused the decline in crypto, especially since November of last year. UST was probably one of the more large scale things. I think a lot of the root cause of this has been people rehypothecating assets. So like basically an asset held by a custodian then being loaned out to multiple parties. There's been the 3AC, or the Three Arrows Capital situation, where there are funds that were trading on strategies that may or may not have been good strategies, that used a lot of borrowed funds from third parties and did not necessarily tell the third parties. Like the crazy thing is, so DeFi has worked incredibly well over the past year in all of these incidents. The thing that has failed has been centralized projects, where people were collecting funds from people, holding them in custody, and then using them themselves to play DeFi markets for returns. And they lost a bunch of money as a result of that. So it's really an endorsement of DeFi and on-chain stuff as much as it is indictment of a lot of the more centralized finance stuff.
It's a lot to chew on. So ultimately, the stuff with Terra, right? As you did indicate, right? A lot of the protocols that people complain about, obviously with Celsius, it's not, these aren't DeFi platforms, right? So a lot of people, you hear a lot of rumors and a lot of ignorant people in the industry itself that just saying like, DeFi crashed and so on and so forth. DeFi worked exactly as intended. Bottom line. What didn't work was CeFi, right? Which is actually interestingly ironic, right? Because, as some of these guys would tell you, some of the OGs in the industry, this whole industry was built initially was for decentralization, right? And to get away from the system itself. So the irony of these centralized platforms being the catalyst is so much loss in the market share over the past, few months, specifically spearheaded by Celsius. It's interesting that these are actually centralized platforms, but people don't distinguish the difference. People just think, crypto crashes, DeFi, killed it, and everyone's going for these unrealistic gains, blah 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 blah. But no DeFi platform that I know of that was a protocol didn't operate exactly how intended. It was essentially, centralized platforms.
Yeah, and I definitely feel really bad. I have a bunch of friends who are not really crypto experts. They're professionals in other fields and everything else that had a bunch of funds. They were chasing returns in Terra. They lost money on that, and they moved it somewhere nice and safe that they thought would custody
Celsius.
asset, Celsius. And now they are contacting me asking for bankruptcy lawyers and everything else for how to deal with Celsius. So yes, people have definitely been burned by this, and I'm worried that, one, those people deserve to be made whole to the extent possible, as well as I'm worried about an overreaction by regulators against the parts of the industry that did not have anything to do with this, and that'll cause everybody else to lose even more money. So they might have a pre-existing agenda of not wanting to have this kind of a product exist, so they may use this as an excuse, but who knows?
Well, I think that's a key point right there, right? So the overreaction from the regulators is probably going to happen, right? Ultimately, in the United States, they don't have the best regulations for, Web3 entrepreneurs, and that's a shame. But ultimately, you can also see that, ultimately the industry's going to keep going. It's going to keep going. People will keep building, and people will find different creative ways to get things done. And people aren't going to stop operating in the Web3 space. And what I hope that happens is people become more educated about, the difference between centralized and decentralized platforms. And, as the oldest saying in the book goes, not your keys, not your coins, right?
Yeah. Another big thing is I think a lot of projects in the space need to be more cautious on their own to avoid sort of own goal loss events. So there was Axie Infinity, which I don't know too much about the fundamentals of the project. I know it basically employs a good fraction of an Asian country's low to middle income people playing this game for money, which is kind of weird. But they were basically hacked due to having an admin account that was not properly secured to a consumer chat application that was being used to contact a bunch of people, as well as some transfers of treasury related things that were basically because people are using consumer end user services and they're using them operationally in ways they shouldn't be using. So it's really something where these projects need to make sure that they're not exposed for internal communications or how they talk to their users out there in a way that's easily hackable by third parties.
Is there some sort of like third party potentially auditing firm or something like that that people could potentially, maybe, request information from a various protocol or something like that before they embark on?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of audit firms out there that do audits. There's very specialized audits, so smart contract audits. There's a few firms, like probably Trail of Bits is one of the best in the world for that. Unfortunately, what happens is these audits are really good for the specific thing that they're auditing. However, they're not necessarily comprehensive over the entire project. You can have a project that has a smart contract at its core that is audited by the best firm in the world, is formally verified, everything else, but then if the founders of the project rug pull or the founders of the project have a marketing site that is unsecured or where stealing somebody's phone number is enough to reset that, and a bunch of people then send funds to the wrong address, that's not the fault of the smart contract, and still it's a multi-$100 million loss event for the users. So you really need to make sure that all of the components get audited and you have comprehensive security there. And there's really nothing that is available to consumers to look at a project and really assess all of the ins and outs of the project. You've also got market risk. So I think what a lot of people do is they just look at if there's a project, say USDC or Tether or something like that, they look and they see if people they trust use those projects. And unfortunately, you end up with a lot of projects, not necessarily those, but others where people are like paid influencers that are saying, yes, this is a great product, and loaning their reputation or really renting and selling their reputation to endorse something that they don't believe in. So, yeah.
Yeah. If you're listening to Ryan over here, there's nothing you can put your money in. Just keep your money in your pocket, right? Don't, there's not going to be anything available out there that you're going to be able to check all the nuts, bolts, and looks and crank. You're not putting your money in none of these DeFi platforms.
Oh, I disagree. I think that you can make a reasonable assessment of risk in a lot of these projects. I think.
How are you doing it? What's your process?
I use Compound.
Compound?
Yeah. I can look at the.
Shout out to Compound. Send me a check. Yeah. Go ahead. What else you use?
I mean, I send the money, so it's I'm on the other side.
What else?
A lot of these DeFi protocols, I think, as long as you feel comfortable looking at the smart contract behind them and the front end code and a bunch of other stuff like that, and
you're looking at all of this before you put $10 on it.
I have a threshold of like a couple $1,000s where I'll experiment with stuff and be willing to take. I mean, if it goes to zero, like whatever. Anything where I'm recommending it to other people, or if I'm using it for a material amount of money, yes, I put a lot more effort into looking at it. There are a few people that I would trust to evaluate something if they use it, then I would go with it.
What do you think about? My check. What do you think about getting a section on our website? What do you think about getting a section on our website? It's like Lackey approved protocols. I'm saying.
One of the things that I'm actually working on is ISAC, so like a crypto ISAC project where a bunch of people from exchanges, from various projects get together. Mostly so if funds get stolen, we can communicate and say these funds have just been stolen, lock them down temporarily, don't take them on your exchange, and things like that. So maybe there's some industry standards. The reason, like, I have enough crypto that I could just retire, but the reason I joined the insurance company is that insurance companies are how security standards go from being something that's a good idea to something that's essentially mandatory for an industry. There was a big fire in New York City where a bunch of women were sewing in a factory that had lots of locked doors, and as a result of that, fire safety standards got improved by insurance companies. The underwriters' laboratories, the people that have the sticker on all the electrical devices, were started by insurers to secure the electrical safety because there were lots of electrical fires that happened early on. Auto safety was driven by insurance companies. Like the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety is a thing that insurers got together to make autos safer than they otherwise would be. So I think insurance companies, and there's a few other big insurance companies in space as well, are going to be able to push a lot of these standards and make them more clear and then also essentially mandatory to get insurance, and that will drive the industry.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about Verdas and how is it that you guys are designing your product, and tell me a little bit more about how is it what you guys do.
Yeah, we're a Lloyd's cover holder, so Lloyd's of London, we have capacity from them. Bermuda.
The Illuminati. Lloyd's is definitely Illuminati.
I am going to get a tour of the building in London next time I'm there, as well as the Swiss Re building and a bunch of other cool stuff there now that I'm in the insurance industry. I'm not the insurance expert in the company. There's some other people involved that are much more experienced with insurance. I had to learn.
You're the party guy.
Yeah, I'm the party and technical security guy, so yeah. And also clearly the travel planning guy. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff there. So yeah, we're a Bermuda licensed carrier as well, and a bunch of cool stuff like that. We are working on.
How many passports do you have? Just
right now, I have 2, but they're both U.S. passports. But yeah,
both.
Yes, you can get a 4-year passport and a 10-year passport.
It's a good thing we're not live streaming. We'll get that off the video. Don't worry.
It's totally fine.
But next, anybody got any questions for Mr. Lackey on anything? Mr. Half, we're gonna need you to come up here, sir. Use the microphone. Come on up here, sir. Let's get a round of applause, Mr. James Half, actual co-founder of Crypto Mondays. Somewhere, someone.
So amazing, Ryan. Fantastic to have you here. Thank you so much. 2 questions. The first, one specific and one opinion. You talked about 5 technologies that Satoshi brought together to create. Could you talk about those? Because I think people don't really know what that is, and it'd be really interesting to hear you talk about that. And secondly, you can put it in your back pocket. What do you think about Curve? So you talked about Compound. I'm looking at Curve because I want to get yield for my stable coins, and I want to know what you think about that. Thank you.
Sure. Well, the easy one is Curve is awesome. I just don't use it because I have mostly BTC and ETH, not stable coins, but yeah, I think the DeFi protocols have stood up so well over such a hostile environment that they are. I have much more faith in them. The weaknesses there are just around how you use them. So as long as you're a sophisticated user that can keep your they're trickier to use if you're an institution, like even a small fund, where you need to worry about succession planning for employees and key management and everything like that. If you're an individual, they work great. The difficulty is tax planning for a lot of people who are not in Puerto Rico and things like that. But they're generally really solid. I'd say, yeah, Compound Curve. There's a few others that are good. Some of the more weird things that are layered on top of those, where it's like the governance token things, I don't fully understand, and I think Warren Buffett is wrong on a lot of things, but the don't invest in things you don't understand is generally a pretty good principle, and I would need to understand them better before I got involved in those. But I have some really smart friends who are super into those things, so that's usually something that indicates you should learn more about it at least. As far as the technologies that went into Bitcoin, I don't know if it was exactly 5, but like the cryptography generally, like public key cryptography, obviously, decentralization of a system. The thing I don't like about, there are alternative systems where you have a bunch of separate cryptocurrencies that would then be priced in a market and traded, so you'd have millions of separate currencies where each issuer would be that, and you'd have market risk things, versus a system like Bitcoin where it's a single system where lots of participants are doing that. It has worked out pretty well, but in general, I like systems that are more federated versus a central system like that. But it did work out really well. The emission curve, where you ended up with a lot of people making money by being in Bitcoin early, was a huge innovation. A lot of stuff that happened post Satoshi was actually like getting end users to manage keys. I would have thought would have been an almost impossible thing to ever have happen, and the industry has done a pretty decent job of, like, through Bit39 and a bunch of other processes do that. The coordination problem of getting open source software out there that's managed by a bunch of users that have essentially adversarial self-interest. Like, if you could convince everyone else to use a bad version of the software, then you would make a lot of money quickly. A lot of stuff like that. The decentralized development model. A lot of cool stuff. There was not a single massive innovation so much as a bunch of like 8 out of 10 innovations that were put together in a really workable system. There's definitely stuff that's missing. Like I would say, if there was I would say zero knowledge systems are actually more magical than even like blockchain stuff was originally. I don't fully understand the math behind like snarks and starks, but I think they are much more things that I would not have expected to be able to exist than blockchain. Blockchain is really not that difficult to understand once you have some basic knowledge there.
Yeah. Next question. No more questions? Let's get a round of applause for my guy, Mr. Ryan Lackey. What is the name of the website? A bird says what?
evertas.com.
EV.
Evertas.
That one right there. Evertas.com. Go ahead, give it a shout. Go ahead and see Mr. Haft afterwards. They're raising capital, Mr. Haft, and I'm sure you want to cut him a check. All right, you guys. We're going to be here from now on, right? I moved back to Old San Juan. I've been gone for quite some time. Pre-COVID, I loved Old San Juan, right? After COVID, Old San Juan became not such a cool place anymore. But actually, Old San Juan is my favorite place to live in the entire world. And I actually live right at the end of this street. So we're going to be here from now on. I'm going to get all the social media channels back up and running. I anticipate our crowds to grow back extensively. Obviously, it's the summertime. A lot of people are traveling. But spread the word that we'll be back here, and also I'll be up to date with getting a lot more activities going. We're also going to start doing barbecues on my rooftop for a lot of the different guys, a lot of different projects. If you have a project that you're looking to raise capital, I want to get a lot of investor groups going together as well. So just start feeding me all your projects and so on and so forth. We're going to get a lot more community vibes going, doing beach barbecues and jungle retreats and so on and so forth. And we're going to bring the vibe back to the community. So that's all I got for you guys. We'll see you right here next week, 7 o'clock. Y'all be sharp. Be here.